December the 7th, 1941. In less than 2 hours, the world changed forever. Explosions ripped through the skies above Hawaii. Battleships burned. Thousands of American sailors fought desperately to survive as fire consumed the waters of Pearl Harbor. Across the Pacific, Japan believed it had just delivered a crushing blow to the United States. Japanese military leaders celebrated, convinced that America would retreat in fear and humiliation. But they were wrong, terribly wrong, because what happened that morning did not destroy America. It awakened something far more dangerous. A sleeping giant with unmatched industrial power, unstoppable determination, and a military machine that would soon reshape the entire world. The attack on Pearl Harbor was not just the beginning of America's war. It was the beginning of America's rise as a global superpower. And the question is not whether the United States would fight back. The real question was how far America would go to make sure it never happened again. Tonight, we uncover the terrifying attack that shocked the nation, the heroes who fought through fire and chaos, and the incredible transformation that turned the United States into the most powerful force of World War II. This is the story of the day America awakened. This is Pearl Harbor. Before the attack, the world was already collapsing into chaos. Adolf Hitler's armies had stormed across Europe with terrifying speed. Poland had fallen. France had collapsed. Nazi Germany appeared unstoppable. In Asia, Imperial Japan was expanding aggressively across China and the Pacific. Japanese military leaders dreamed of building a massive empire that would dominate Asia for generations. Meanwhile, the United States watched carefully from across the oceans. Many Americans still remembered the horrors of World War I and wanted nothing to do with another global conflict. Families had suffered enough. The Great Depression had already devastated millions of lives. Across the country, isolationism became a powerful political force. Many believed the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans would keep America safe from foreign wars. But President Franklin D. Roosevelt saw the growing danger. He understood that if dictators controlled Europe and Asia, America itself could eventually face the same threat. Quietly, the United States began helping allied nations through weapons production, supplies, and economic support. American factories started preparing for something bigger, something coming, something many feared but hoped could still be avoided. As tensions rose between the United States and Japan, economic conflict intensified. America strongly opposed Japanese expansion into China and Southeast Asia. In response, the United States restricted exports of oil, steel, and other critical resources to Japan. These sanctions terrified Japanese military leaders because their empire depended heavily on imported fuel. Without oil, Japan's Navy and Air Force could not continue expanding. Japanese commanders believed they had only two choices: retreat from expansion or strike quickly before America became too powerful. They chose war. But Japan knew it could not defeat the United States in a long industrial conflict. American factories alone had greater production potential than much of the world combined. Japanese leaders understood that if America fully mobilized, the balance of power would become almost impossible to overcome. Their solution was simple but dangerous: launch a surprise attack powerful enough to cripple the American Pacific Fleet before the United States could respond. Shock America, break morale, force negotiations, end the war before America's true strength could awaken. It was one of the boldest military gambles in modern history, and at first it seemed terrifyingly successful. In the early hours of December the 7th, Japanese aircraft carriers moved silently across the Pacific Ocean. Hundreds of aircraft prepared for launch. Pilots received final instructions. Engines roared to life across the carrier decks. Then wave after wave of Japanese bombers and fighter planes lifted into the sky and headed directly toward Hawaii. At Pearl Harbor, most American servicemen had no idea what was coming. It was Sunday morning. Many sailors were still asleep. Some prepared for church services. Others relaxed during one of the few peaceful moments of military life. Then suddenly the sound of aircraft filled the air. At first, some Americans believed the planes belonged to the U.S. military. Seconds later, bombs exploded across the harbor. Torpedoes slammed into battleships. Massive columns of fire erupted from the water. Japanese pilots attacked with speed and precision, targeting ships, aircraft, and military infrastructure. Chaos spread instantly. Sirens screamed across the naval base. Smoke darkened the sky while sailors rushed desperately to anti-aircraft guns. Many had little or no combat experience. Yet in the middle of confusion and terror, acts of incredible courage began to appear everywhere. Men risked their lives pulling wounded sailors from burning compartments. Medics treated injured servicemen while explosions shook the ground around them. Pilots attempted to launch aircraft despite enemy attacks destroying runways and hangars. Pearl Harbor had become a battlefield within minutes. The USS Arizona became the symbol of the disaster. A Japanese armor-piercing bomb struck near the ship's ammunition storage area and triggered a catastrophic explosion. The blast tore the battleship apart and instantly killed more than 1,000 American sailors and Marines. Fire consumed the vessel while thick smoke rose high above the harbor. Nearby ships also suffered devastating damage. The USS Oklahoma rolled over after multiple torpedo strikes, trapping hundreds of sailors inside. Across Pearl Harbor, servicemen struggled to survive inside burning ships in oil-covered water. Some men drowned while trying to escape sinking compartments. Others continued fighting even after suffering terrible injuries. Stories of heroism spread quickly after the attack. Doris Miller, a Navy cook with no formal combat training, helped move wounded sailors to safety before operating an anti-aircraft gun during the attack. His bravery later made him one of the first African-American heroes widely recognized during the war. Throughout Pearl Harbor, ordinary Americans displayed extraordinary courage under impossible conditions. For Japan, the attack initially appeared to be a massive victory. Battleships burned across the harbor. Hundreds of aircraft were destroyed. American military leaders faced humiliation and shock. But hidden beneath the destruction was a critical mistake that would later haunt Japan for the rest of the war. Several key American aircraft carriers were not present at Pearl Harbor during the attack. Repair facilities, submarine bases, and enormous fuel storage areas also survived. These assets would become vital in the months ahead. Japan had damaged America's pride, but it had failed to destroy America's ability to fight. Even worse for Japan, the attack triggered exactly the response they hoped to avoid. National unity exploded across the United States. Fear turned into rage. Anger transformed into determination. Young Americans rushed to enlist in the military by the thousands. Recruitment centers overflowed with volunteers. Families hung American flags outside their homes. Political divisions vanished almost overnight. Pearl Harbor had not divided the nation. It had united it completely. The next day, President Franklin D. Roosevelt addressed Congress and the American people in one of the most famous speeches in modern history. Calm but furious, Roosevelt described the attack as a date which will live in infamy. Millions listened through radios across the country. The speech lasted only a few minutes, but its impact was enormous. Congress declared war on Japan almost immediately. Soon after, Germany and Italy declared war on the United States, fully pulling America into World War II. Now the conflict would become truly global. American soldiers, sailors, Marines, and pilots would soon fight across Europe, North Africa, and the Pacific. The United States had entered the deadliest war in human history, but America's greatest weapon was not only its military, it was its industrial power. Almost immediately after Pearl Harbor, American factories transformed into engines of war production. Automobile companies stopped building civilian cars and started producing tanks, armored vehicles, aircraft engines, and military trucks. Shipyards expanded rapidly along both coasts. Massive factories operated day and night, producing weapons, ammunition, ships, aircraft, and supplies on a scale the world had never seen before. Women entered the workforce in enormous numbers as millions of men joined the military. Rosie the Riveter became a symbol of determination and national unity. American workers understood that every tank, every bullet, every bomber could help save soldiers fighting overseas. The United States became what Roosevelt proudly called the arsenal of democracy. And soon the industrial capacity of America began overwhelming the Axis powers. While Germany and Japan struggled with resources and production limits, the United States continued expanding at incredible speed. American factories eventually produced hundreds of thousands of aircraft, tens of thousands of tanks, and massive naval fleets capable of fighting across multiple oceans at the same time. Historians today still consider American industrial production one of the decisive factors behind Allied victory in World War II. The attack on Pearl Harbor also changed the mentality of the American military. Lessons learned from the disaster forced major improvements in intelligence, coordination, aircraft carrier warfare, and naval strategy. American commanders studied every mistake made during the attack. Radar systems improved, pilot training intensified, new military technologies emerged rapidly. The United States Navy shifted focus toward aircraft carriers, which would soon dominate naval warfare across the Pacific. American scientists and engineers accelerated research into advanced weapons, communication systems, and logistics. Pearl Harbor became not only a tragedy, but also a brutal lesson that transformed America into a far more dangerous military power. Japan had hoped to prevent American expansion in the Pacific. Instead, the attack accelerated America's military evolution at astonishing speed. Only 6 months later, the United States struck back at the Battle of Midway. Using intercepted Japanese communications, American intelligence successfully predicted Japan's next major move. American aircraft carriers launched devastating attacks that destroyed 4 Japanese carriers in a single battle. Midway became one of the most important turning points of the Pacific War. For the first time, Japan lost the strategic initiative. American forces began pushing westward across the Pacific through brutal island campaigns that would continue for years. Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, Okinawa. Each battle came with terrible sacrifice, but step by step the United States moved closer to Japan itself. Pearl Harbor had awakened a military machine that would not stop until victory was achieved. Even today, Pearl Harbor remains one of the most emotional and powerful moments in American history. Visitors from around the world travel to Hawaii to see the USS Arizona Memorial resting above the remains of the sunken battleship. Oil still slowly leaks from the wreck more than 80 years later, often called the Black Tears of the Arizona. The memorial stands as a reminder of sacrifice, courage, and the cost of war. But Pearl Harbor also represents something larger. It represents what can happen when a nation under attack unites with determination and purpose. Japan believed the attack would weaken America. Instead, it awakened the full power of the United States, a nation capable of building endless ships, aircraft, and weapons, a nation willing to fight across oceans and continents, a nation that would eventually help destroy both Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan. Pearl Harbor was supposed to intimidate America into retreat. Instead, it created one of the most powerful military responses in modern history. And once America awakened, the world would never be the same again.